He says, why am I in prison? It is to advance the gospel. If you want to star that in your journal, that is what this is all about. Being in prison for Paul is not a punishment. He is saying it is to advance the gospel. Okay? Paul is going to tell us that the mindset we need to have is to be gospel-minded. That everything we think about should be about spreading the gospel of Jesus. Because Paul understands God's sovereignty and purpose on his life. No matter where he is, that is his ultimate goal. And that should be the ultimate goal for the church as well. In the last series, a couple weeks ago, we talked about the three main purposes of the church. Could somebody shout those out? Do we remember what those three things? Think about the three metaphors we talked about for the church. What are the three things the church should do? I'm going to write them down.
Family.
Okay, we remember family was one of the metaphors. What else?
Body.
The body. What's the third one? Third metaphor. We walked around, we did all these stations. The temple was the third one. Okay? And we said with each of these metaphors, it explains a function of the church, or what the purpose of the church should be. We said those things are as a family, that we love one another. Okay? As the body, that we serve together. I apologize for my handwriting. I don't know how many people are left-handed here. Do we have any other left-handed friends? Really? Nobody is left-handed in this church besides me? That's incredible. But so an insight into my life is when I'm writing on with a marker, if I press with my hand, I erase everything as I'm writing. And so I have to do this motion while writing. And then as the temple is that we worship God. That's still flooring me that I'm the only left-handed person in this church. I'm going to have to come back. Okay, good. At least somebody. I'll have to mentor them under that. Okay. And so as the church, our goal is to share the gospel. We are all about the gospel. And so within each of these things, well, we love one another. We do that, and that shows the gospel. We serve together with other people, and that shares the gospel. When we're worshiping God, we are sharing the gospel with each other. Paul says that is what it's all about for the church. And so when we focus on the gospel, what is the effect of that? What does that do for us and for others? In verse 13, Paul tells us what's happening. He says, so that it has become known throughout the whole imperial guard and to all the rest that my imprisonment is for Christ. People will know that we are all about Jesus if the gospel is our focus. They will know what our purpose is. So let's do a little math problem here. Paul gives us a little hint of this. So Apostle Paul says he was guarded for 24 hours a day in the Praetorian Guard with these imperial guards. Okay, so we have 24 hours a day. We know that the guard changed every 4 hours. And that Paul was in prison for 2 years with these people. How many opportunities did Paul have to share the gospel? So in your little journal, we'll see who's math-minded. If Paul was guarded for 24 hours a day by a different Praetorian guard, and he was chained to that guard for every 4 hours, that guard changed. If Paul was imprisoned for 2 years, how many times did he have the opportunity to share the gospel every time he was rechained to another guard? I see a lot of us pulling out our calculators. I love that. That's wonderful. What is it? I don't know if it's not the number I have, but it's around $4,000 is where we are. The number I have, and my math might be wrong, so I apologize. Okay. So he had 4,380 opportunities to share the gospel with these Praetorian guards. Now, granted, there are guards that probably had multiple shifts, like, every other week they came in. But we're talking about the amount of opportunities he had. Every time he's unchained from a guard and rechained back to someone, he sees as an opportunity to share the gospel. And we know that in the Praetorian Guard at this time, there were 4,220 men there in the Praetorian Guard. So you can bet that every single one of them heard the gospel from Paul. Paul has this mindset that when he's in prison, that these guards are literally chained to him. He says, I'm not chained, I'm not in prison here. You're in prison with me. I'm the one that gets to share the gospel with you, and you can't leave. Like, you have an audience that's literally chained to his arm, right? And let's think about that. Think about a group of people that are more closed off to the gospel. Talking about the Roman guards, the Praetorian Guard that was in charge of protecting Caesar, who they thought was a god himself. Can you think of anybody else in the Roman world that would not hear the gospel? And Paul says, don't you get it? This is the opportunity that God has set up. These are the people that I get to share the gospel with. And so, what's your Praetorian? What's that place that you think is I'm never going to get to share the gospel there? Or a group of people that I never would get to talk to? Maybe that's where God has placed you on purpose. So let's take a couple minutes and think about this. Where do we need to shift our mindset from those people will never hear the gospel, or they would never accept it, or they'd never listen to me, to this is where God has placed me for this very purpose. So take a couple minutes. We're going to journal about this question. In the back of your Philippians book, there's actually a bunch of blank pages. If you want to use that for extra space for journaling, we want to think about that. What is your Praetorian that feels close to the gospel? What are some places that you need to shift your mindset to focus on being the one that God has placed there for that purpose? So take a couple minutes, journal about that, and then we'll get some responses to encourage each other. Okay? All right, so write down your last bit of thoughts here, and we're going to share out so we can encourage each other that there are lots of places we can go or people we can talk to. So whenever you're ready, shout them out. What are some people or places that we are placed where we can share the gospel that seem otherwise that nobody's going to be there to tell them?
Friend groups.
So in our friend groups. What else? Say it a little louder. Okay. Yeah.
Workplace.
At work? Might be the only Christian voice they hear, depending on where you work.
Neighbors.
Right? Your neighbor?
Just like strangers. like people you meet on the street. I've had some great conversations with people who I've never talked to
Okay.
before.
I was going to write street people, and that wasn't the word I wanted to use.
Bypassing.
Oh yeah, let's do by. Okay.
I don't know, kind of like street.
Community events.
Okay, so just like when you're out at community events, what are some examples of community events? What do you mean by that?
Like farmers market or the Christmas thing they do, places like that.
Yeah.
Great.
We do traveling bus outline.
Ooh, I like that. On an airplane, on the bus. Again, think about Paul. You're literally chained to the person. Like when you're on an airplane seat, that person's not going anywhere. Like you got audience. It's good. At the grocery store. I know for me and for other students, school is probably a place that seems closed to the gospel, especially.
In jail.
Hopefully not. I was gonna say, hopefully none of us are in jail right now, or we're violating something. Okay. Yeah, you can go into a jail and they can't leave. Yeah, so you have an audience, right? It sounds like we're like, trapping people. That's not my goal here. We're thinking outside the box of, there are lots of opportunities to share the gospel maybe we don't recognize.
There are other churches you can go to. Like not like I don't mean like go to like other religions and stuff, but I think having conversations with other like at churches about religion in general.
I like what you're saying. I think this is what you're trying to say, to challenge other believers. People who maybe think they got it.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
It's good, though. Okay, so we'll pause our list there. So there are lots of places where the gospel may seem closed off, that other people aren't going. I know one of the things that I think is so cool about one of the things Young Life does is we have a ministry called Capernaum, which reaches our special needs friends. Like that is an area that the gospel seems closed to sometimes, that people don't go to. So it's good to be thinking about those opportunities where the gospel still needs to be shared, and maybe you're the only one, that's the only voice those people will hear. All right, so when we focus on the gospel, if this is our mindset, what happens? What is the effect? We're going to keep going into that idea. So in verse 14, Paul says, so in 13 he says, the guards are stuck with me. I'm sharing the gospel with every single one of them. All 4,000 have heard the gospel. In verse 14, he says, and most of the brothers, having become confident in the Lord by my imprisonment, are much more bold to speak the word without fear. That is one of the consequences. Not just the unbelievers hearing, but as Donnie pointed to, the other believers are hearing, and it's becoming more real for them. And they're becoming bolder and speaking with confidence. If Paul can do it from prison, why can't we do it out in the world? And so it inspires other people to action as well. In verse 15, it says, some indeed preach Christ from envy and rivalry, but others from goodwill. The latter do it out of love, knowing that I am put here for the defense of the gospel. And the former proclaim Christ out of selfish ambition, not sincerely, but thinking to afflict me in my imprisonment. See, some Christians were seeing this as an opportunity that Paul, this great superstar of a preacher, is in prison. Now is my opportunity to rise up and become famous in this Christian world. How does Paul react to this? First of all, how would we react to this? If we are out there, we are serving, we are on mission, we are bringing people to the gospel, and then we can't do that anymore. Maybe we get injured. Maybe we have a family emergency. We can't do that. We see other people putting us down and saying, finally they're out of the way, now it's my time to shine. And they're doing it out of selfish ambition. How would we react to that? But more importantly, how does Paul react to that? In the next verse, verse 18, he says, what then? Only that in every way, whether in pretense or in truth, Christ is proclaimed. And in that I rejoice. Yes, and I will rejoice. Paul's not indifferent to erroneous teaching. He certainly addresses that with a lot of churches and a lot of letters. But he's more concerned that the gospel be preached at any cost. And at least these people are getting the baseline of who Jesus is. And if he needs to go back and fix that, that's okay, but at least they've heard who Jesus is. And I'm going to be honest, this is a hard one for me to wrap my head around. I imagine it's a hard one for most of you as well. I know we have a lot of people that have church hurt and people that have not been good to us in the church. And Paul says here, but at least the gospel was preached. And that's what matters. And so, what do you guys think about that? What do you think about this idea of forgiving all those other faults of whatever pastors or churches have done? To say at least the gospel was preached, and however it affected me, people came to know Jesus, and that's all that should matter. That's a hard truth to come to. But when we are gospel-minded and gospel-focused, that's all that should matter. So I encourage you to read over that verse this week. Maybe put a note to come back to that one. Because I know for me, that's one that I have to wrestle with a little bit. In the end, we have to think, where is our mind truly focused? Is it on the gospel alone or on protecting the reputation of Christianity as an organization? Do we believe Jesus can handle other people's doubts, that he'll deal with whatever else is going on? Do we want to control how the gospel is spread, or do we simply want to be obedient and spread the gospel? So how do we get to this mindset? In verse 19, Paul gives us the answer. He says, "For I know through your prayers and the help of the Spirit of Jesus Christ, this will turn out for my deliverance." Guys, we need help. We can't have that mindset on our own. We need prayers from other believers. We need to build each other up as the body of Christ in the church. We need the Holy Spirit to make us more like Jesus. And it's because of this, Paul can say this next part. Verse 20, "As it is my eager expectation and hope that I will not be at all ashamed, but that I will have full courage, and now as always, Christ will be honored in my body, whether by life or by death." And really focusing on this next part. "For to me to live is Christ, and to die is gain." Paul realized that he'll be honored whether you live or die if you are all about the gospel. If you die, you go to be with Christ. And if you're still alive, you get to tell more people about the gospel. Either way, you win. You are fulfilling the purpose that you are called to. I like the way the Message Bible puts this verse. I know the Message is a little more of a paraphrase of Scripture, but I think it really gets to the heart of what Paul is saying here. It says, so kind of a retranslation of this verse. It says, "They didn't shut me up, they gave me a pulpit. I'm alive, I am Christ's messenger. Dead, I'm his bounty. Life versus more life. I can't lose." That's the mindset we have to have. He continues in verse 22, "If I am to live in the flesh, that means fruitful labor for me. Yet which I shall choose, I cannot tell. I am hard pressed between the two. My desire is to depart and to be with Christ, for that is far better. But to remain in the flesh is more necessary on your account." Because of this, Paul decides it's better for me to be alive. That's really his reason. It's better for me to live for your benefit, not for mine. I'm in prison. I'm in a terrible situation right now. Like, it'd be much easier for me to die and go be with Jesus. But for your sake, for the sake of the gospel, I want to live. So he continues in verse 25, explaining this idea further. "Convinced of this, I know that I will remain and continue with you all, for your progress and joy in the faith, so that in me you may have ample cause to glory in Christ Jesus, because of my coming to you again." He wants to say that so that Christ will be glorified, and more people will have the opportunity to share the gospel, and to share the gospel with others. So, after reading this passage, I'm left with one big question. And that question is, do I love the gospel this much? And do you? This kind of radical mindset, to be excited to be in prison, to choose to stay, to rejoice in getting to continue to live a hard life instead of getting to go to be in paradise with Jesus, is only possible if we are deeply and passionately in love with the gospel. Church, we have to start shifting our mindset to being in love with the gospel. So what is it? What is this gospel? What is the good news that we are told to share with everyone that's going to radically change the way we think about the world? How can we be as passionate as Paul about this story? We have to tell it again and again. And so, let's tell the story. Let's spend some time in your journal. Write down, how would you explain the gospel to someone? What is this story that is both worth living for and worth dying for? So, spend some time. If you do bullet points in the back of your journal, that's fine. How would you explain the gospel to someone? What are the key points that have to be part of this story? So write down how you'd explain it. If you're unsure or not a follower of Jesus, what have you heard about who Jesus is? And jot down those parts. We're going to spend a good chunk of time here. So take your time, flesh it out, go back, add points. How would you explain the gospel to someone? Go. That's awesome, guys. So let's look at our story. So this is the story that we should tell over and over again. That God created us. But we chose sin. We chose to break that relationship. We're separated from God. So we are under that judgment. We have a penalty because we chose something else. And the world, it continues to be broken. That sin ruins everything. It corrupts and rots everything. And so the world is broken, and we're the ones that broke it. But God promises to fix it. And then he chose a family and said, I want these people, look at them, how they follow God. And then that family grew into a nation. And these people, look at them. This is what the relationship should be like. But then they continue to sin, and they break it, and they fall away, and they choose other things. But God makes a promise, and he keeps it. He says, I love you, and I'm going to fix this problem. So he becomes a man in the form of Jesus, and he comes down, and he teaches about God, and he shows people the way this relationship should work. He leads a sin-free life, a life we were meant to live. And he proves that he is who he says he is, that he is God. And yet we still chose something else. We chose death for him. And so Jesus had to die for our sins. Somebody had to pay the debt. And God said, I'll pay it. And so he restores the relationship through his death. He's crucified as a criminal. But that's not the end. He's resurrected. He comes back. He says, death is not the end. He conquers death. And he's alive again. And he goes and he reigns in heaven as king. And he says, I want you to be with me. I still want that relationship. And we still have the choice. So that's the good news. That is what we are living for. That is the only story worth telling. Nothing else matters when we are deeply in love with the gospel. And so that's the challenge this week, is to tell the story. Tell it again and again and again. Tell it to yourself in the mirror in the morning. Tell it as you drive to work. Tell it to the people you meet. Tell it to your families. For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that whoever believes in him will not perish but have everlasting life. Tell the story. We're going to end today by singing one last song. It's all about telling the story. So if you guys will stand, Holly will join me. We'll sing one last song.